that's cool, but he ain't like me. She can get a taste. She can get a taste. Fuck what a nigga say. It's all the same like Mary Kate. She can get a taste.
Hey guys, and welcome back. If you're new here, then welcome to my channel. If you're a subscriber, then welcome back. We've been here before. So today I am going to be making another mental health related video. As it is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought I'd do some more mental health videos, which I'm going to try and do this month. So today I am going to be talking about self-harm. If you are easily triggered by talks of self-harm, then please do not watch this video. I've got plenty of other videos that aren't mental health related, so please feel free to check them out, but please do not watch this if you are going to be triggered by what I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be talking about self-harm. I'm going to give you guys a definition of self-harm. I'm going to talk about some statistics. I'm going to talk about the stigma around self-harm. I'm going to talk about why people may self-harm, and I'm going to give you guys some advice on what to do if you are thinking about self-harm, or if you do self-harm and you're looking to stop. If you don't follow me on Instagram, then it's down below. I did ask some of my followers to give me some of their opinions, so if you did and you're watching this video, then thank you very much for getting involved. I will be talking about some of their points of view in this video, so once again, thank you if you did open up to me and answer some of my questions on my Instagram story. Okay, so the definition of self-harm. The Oxford definition of self-harm is deliberate injury to oneself, typically as a manifestation of a psychological or psychiatric disorder. So obviously this says self-harm is deliberate injury. It's not accidental. It is deliberate harm to yourself. And it also says as a manifestation of psychological or psychiatric disorder, which is mental illness. So people who struggle with a mental illness are more likely to self-harm. Obviously there must be some cases where people aren't struggling with a mental health illness but do go to self-harm, and then it obviously might lead to a mental illness. It's the Oxford definition of self-harm, if any of you are watching and weren't too sure on what self-harm was actually defined as. I did see another definition on Wikipedia, and this is the Wikipedia definition of self-harm. It is defined as the intentional, direct injury of body tissue. Now, half of that defined as intentional, which is, yeah, true. Self-harm is intentional harm. The next bit, direct injury of body tissue. I think there may be some issues with this definition because self-harm can be other things than injuring body tissue, such as punching oneself or punching objects, hair pulling, pinching, excessive drinking, excessive drug use. There's so many different ways of self-harm, and it's different to each person. So I think this definition is quite damaging and is quite undermining to people who do not self-harm in this way. They may feel like they're being belittled because their version of self-harm isn't in this definition. But there is a lot of different ways of self-harm, and it's more than just cutting. It is so many different ways, and I feel like a lot of people forget that. Obviously because what we see in like films where people are self-harming, it is mainly cutting, and this just isn't a very good view of self-harm, because that's not the only way that people do self-harm. So this definition to me is quite damaging, and we're just going to cancel out that definition. Cancelled. Some statistics which I found from therecoveryvillage.com. About 17% of people will self-harm in their lifetime. The average age of first self-harm incident is 13, and 45% of people use cutting as their method of self-injury. Now, this may be why there's more coverage over cutting as a form of self-harm, because the majority of people do self-harm in this way. But we must also remember the other 55% of people do not self-harm in this way. And one of the points, the average age of first self-harm is 13. I think that was around the time that I first started to self-harm. If you haven't watched my mental health video, then I'll link it somewhere for you guys to watch. But yeah, 13, which makes sense to me, because 13 is a year where a lot of people go through puberty, and obviously there's a influx of emotions and hormones, which can make things a lot harder for younger people. It's understandable why that's the first age, but also there is a lot of people who self-harm at younger ages. There's also a lot of people who will self-harm later on in life due to certain traumas, or their mental health actually decreasing. So again, these statistics are just what they've found, but it obviously doesn't relate to everyone. Like I said before, there's loads of different people who self-harm, all for different reasons, all at different ages, all in different ways, which is very important, which we need to remember. Yeah, 17% of people will self-harm in their lifetime. 17% might not seem like a lot, but if you think about 17% of the whole world, it's a lot of people. And I'm sure I saw a statistic once, and it was like 1 in 4 or 5 people have self-harmed, which is a lot of people. If you think of your family or your friendship group, there's a high likelihood that someone in your family or friendship group have self-harmed. It is a very common thing, which I've noticed. I mean, just from my polls on Instagram, I had a lot of people responding to it, which was surprising to me, but then not so surprising, because like I said, a lot of people suffer with this, which is sad. But it's also something to bear in mind if you think that you're alone and no one else can relate and people will judge you on it. There is a lot of people out there who are struggling the same as you, and who you can confide in, because they will understand. There is a lot of stigma around self-harm, a lot of negative feelings around it from people who do not self-harm, which is crazy to me, because how are you going to have an opinion on something that you have never experienced, something that you don't understand? It's very ignorant, to say the least. A lot of people associate self-harm with attention seeking, which is a very damaging idea to have, as this can lead to people who are suffering not wanting to go for help because they believe that they're going to be seen as attention seeking. And it's very damaging, because I feel like in this day and age we're trying to bring awareness to mental health issues and self-harm, and for people to carry on having this view that it's attention seeking is massively ignorant, and massively damaging to so many people who really want to get help, but they can't do it because of what they fear people will think of them. And of course, attention may be a part of it, but not in such a negative way. People may self-harm because it's like a cry for help. They want people to know that they're suffering, but they're struggling to communicate that. So in turn, they will self-harm because they can't communicate it. So they'll self-harm so that someone will notice that they're in pain, someone will offer them help, but it is never attention seeking. Another stigma is that only young people suffer from self-harm, which is completely not true. Completely not true. Of course, a lot of the statistics and everything are based on young people because there has been a rise in young people who do self-harm, especially with the stresses of social media and like education. Those all come into play for it. But there is also older people who suffer with self-harm, and like I said earlier, some people self-harm later on in their life. Specifically the older generation, like 65 plus, a lot of them reach a time in their lives where like most of their families died, their kids have grown up and like left home, that they're very alone, so they will feel a lot of pain and take it out in the form of self-harm. So I think that's something that we all need to bear in mind as well, is we need to look out for the older generation because they still have mental health issues. It doesn't just stop at a certain age. It can often get worse when you are older. Also, there's a greater suicide risk with older people as well. And a lot of the time, their self-harm can actually lead to suicide. I feel like there's not enough coverage over self-harm in the older community. So just a little thing for us to remember. And there's also the assumption that someone who self-harms is unstable. This one, because someone self-harms doesn't mean that they are unstable. A lot of the time, people who self-harm are very aware of their struggle, very aware of their pain. They're not unstable. They're very sure and certain of what they're going through, hence the need for self-harm. It's their way of coping and dealing with the emotions that they have that they can't deal with any other way. So if you do not self-harm and you see someone with scars, please do not assume that they are unstable, because that is not the case. There's another assumption that it is silly or stupid, and an outsider looking in, fair enough if you feel that way, that it's silly to cause harm to yourself. It's not a it's against our natural instincts to cause harm to ourselves. Our natural instincts are to avoid harm at all costs, but someone who self-harms isn't necessarily having those same instincts, because they're dealing with so many things that logic just is the last thing on their mind. Again, a lot of the time it is linked to mental illness, so which is an issue in the brain. So obviously the same process of thinking to a person who doesn't struggle with mental illness is completely different. So comparing the same logic to someone who hasn't got mental health issues to someone who has is completely off balance. It's not a good way to compare at all. So it's a silly way to think that someone is silly for self-harming. There we go. So obviously people think it's silly or stupid and think, what is there to gain from self-harm? Which is what I'm going to come into next, on the reasons why people may self-harm. One person said to me, it is a relief and it's a different pain to the one in your head, which is so relatable. Honestly, it's very, very relatable. A lot of people will self-harm because there's so much going on in your head. Like, there's so much pain and like struggle going on in your head, and a relief from that is self-harm to a lot of people, because it takes your mind away from the pain that you're feeling in your head and the struggle that you're going through in your head, and it takes your mind off that for a second. You just get a few seconds of relief from that. So a lot of people have said that it's like a relief, and it's a distraction, and it's a way to have control over something when you can't even control what's going on in your head. Like, this is the only thing that you have control over. This physical pain that you inflict on yourself is the only thing that you can control at that current moment in time. And you have to be going through a lot of pain to actually want to cause harm to your body. So I think instead of these negative thoughts, instead of these stigmas that we have around self-harm, just take a second and think, before saying something horrible to someone who has scars, think about how much pain they have dealt with to actually do this to themselves. Think about your lowest moment in your life and then add 10 to that. That is the level of pain you have to be going through to want to inflict pain on yourself. So please be mindful of that. If you are watching this and you've never self-harmed, please be mindful of what people can be going through. There's two other sides to this as well. People may self-harm because they feel numb, so they want to feel some sort of pain to stop them from feeling numb. Now, when I was going through the peak of my mental health issues, a lot of the time I did feel numb, which is crazy because you associate mental illness sort of with feeling a lot of pain. Now, when you go from feeling the pain to feeling numb, it's a very dangerous place to be, because you've already gone through this stage of feeling so much pain and distress and sadness that your brain almost does this coping mechanism where you feel numb. You like reach this brick wall of numbness, and it's very dangerous, because if you feel nothing at all, then what is stopping you from just ending your life? There's nothing at all stopping you, because you don't feel any you don't feel any guilt, you don't feel you don't feel sadness for your life ending, because you just numb anyway. So obviously it's a very hard place to be in. It's a very hard place to get out of, because it can affect every single one of your relationships in your life, because you're fighting to feel something but then stopping yourself from feeling something, because you know if you do start to feel again, that is when all this sadness and pain will come back. But yeah, so a reason for self-harming then is to then in turn feel something, so feeling numb, and to relieve that is to self-harm, so you feel some bit of pain. And then there's the other side to it. There's the feeling too much, being overwhelmed by everything that you're feeling, so then wanting a distraction from that, wanting a different sort of pain, so resulting in self-harm. So of course it depends on the person on why they self-harm. Obviously there's plenty of different reasons, and I obviously haven't covered all of them because it's very different for every person. But yeah, those are a few of reasons why people may self-harm and may resort to that. And if you struggle with self-harm or are thinking of self-harming, then it's always very important to get some help, whether that's from a friend, from family, or even better, some mental health services. There are mental health services online who can help. I'll link them below. There's a lot of mental health services who specialise in self-harm as well, so they can help you with different methods of stopping self-harm, because it is like an addiction. It is like any other sort of substance abuse, like alcoholism, drug addiction. It's the same in essence, because like drug misuse, you are reaching for that high, that release of endorphins. It is the same as that, and it can become an addiction. So it's important to get help for that, because you would get help if you had alcoholism or a drug addiction. You'd get help for that. So this is no different. We need to normalize seeking help for mental health issues, because it's the same way as if you broke your leg or your arm, you would go to the doctor. It should be the same for mental health issues, and the sooner we realize going for help for mental health issues, the sooner more people can get better. I also took some advice from some of my followers, and a lot of them said, of course, get help from professionals. There's also be creative and distract yourself. One thing that I found really helped when I was struggling was writing things down. I literally used to write and write and write and write and write until the urges stopped. And I think that is mainly what helps me get through, more than anything, was being able to write everything down. You don't even have to go back and read it. Like, even if you just write how you feel down and then chuck it away or burn it, it's like you're offloading all of that, all of those feelings, in a different way to self-harm. Someone else says that they got tattoos to cover up their scars, which was like making art out of their self-harm, which I think is a really beautiful idea. I would love to do that one day, because I feel like it adds a new memory on top of a memory that can be quite painful. Someone else also said there are other forms of release that are less painful and more beneficial. So it can be anything that you find enjoyment in. You can use that to distract yourself from self-harm. I think there are many different ways that can be beneficial for different people, and of course seeing a professional is can be really helpful. So yeah, I hope you all found this video beneficial. I hope those of you who have never experienced this have found it informative, and hopefully now can understand self-harm a bit more. Hopefully I will be doing some more mental health videos this month, so if you want to see more of those, then subscribe, and I hope you all have a lovely day. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.
Yeah, that's cool, but he ain't like me. She can get a taste. She can get a taste. Fuck what a nigga say. It's all the same like Mary Kate. She can get a taste.